Today we're going to talk about some jewelry engraving books. Things you should have in your library that will help you get started doing lettering, monograms, or just general decorative designs that are going to be wanted by people in your engraving career. These books are commonly available from jewelry supply houses, or certainly you can look online in the used book places, even Amazon or Libra, some of those websites, and definitely you should be able to find these copies pretty cheap. We've got 4 to look at here today. Really, one of them I'm missing the cover to. It's the Winter's book, Winter School of Jewelry Engraving. We'll look in detail at it. We've got the R. Allen Hardy Jewelry Engravers Manual. That's definitely easily available new. This was published in 1954. We've got the Art of Engraving. It's a Lindsay publication. No relationship to Steve Lindsay, to my knowledge. And then last but not least, we've got Engraving on Precious Metals, and this was published, I think, in, well, let's see, first printing was 1958. So there you go. Let's just kind of start going through these page by page and see what there is to like or dislike about them. Okay, we're going to start out with the Jewelry Engravers Manual by R. Allen Hardy, and this was probably one of the first books I started out with. And it says it's got a systematic guide to self-development that puts first things first and explains step by step what to do and how to do it. While it is true that personal instruction in a good technical school or by a competent individual teacher otherwise is the best for all mastery of such art, we believe that for the many who are unable to arrange for such instruction, this book comes nearest to it. Okay, well, I won't disagree that it's got a lot of useful information in it. These chapters here are correct shaping and sharpening of square script gravers, cutting script letters, cutting ribbon letters, vertical script letters, Roman letters, hardening and tempering steel, cutting block alphabets, cutting Old English alphabet, designing and cutting monograms, final general instructions, and a glossary of terms and a question and answers area. So here we talk about some of the different gravers and the handles they've got here. We've got a cracker sharpener, a ball vise, and we get into details of how to sharpen the face and the belly angles or heel angles. We talk about the lift, and particularly putting the belly angle more on one side for the script letters. We can see that here. Pretty good illustrations here. It's talking about using a flat graver for doing your cuts. And here's a correct posture for engraving. We can talk about that some. Recommended hand position or alternative hand positions. Exercises, parallel lines, circle lines, thicker, thin lines. And we talk about the shading or the beauty cuts, flare cuts some people call them, and even double cuts to get more of a precise shape. And then we get into script letters. Here's our alphabet, and really here is the correct alphabet with all of the letters, or excuse me, all of the arrows drawn to show which way to cut the letters. And there's a very specific reason for that involves the ball vise itself And actually I'll do a video at some point on the ergonomics of cutting script letters and why the script alphabet was developed to make it easy to cut a lettering style. Many people think it's just a curved letter. Really, they're not curved letters. They're basically straight lines that the flares create an illusion of a round line. Anyway, lots of good information here. Talks a little bit about script monograms. And we talk about ribbon letters, which are sort of a variation. And vertical letters, Roman letters. Here we talk about hardening and tempering of steel, using an alcohol torch to temper it and water to harden. Or this stuff is basically not necessary if you buy good modern steels, and you don't even have to worry about that kind of thing. Here we talk about block alphabets, flat gravers, which are used with the block alphabet, round gravers, liners, doing the wiggle tool, just general information that you need. Then we're going to get into Old English style letters, just barely. We're going to talk a little bit about monograms. And here, this is one of the really useful things about this book, is it has all these monogram styles laid out in different ways. These are diamond monograms here. Here we've got a circle monogram with squares, or excuse me, circle monograms with block letters. And here we've got script monograms in a circle. And, you know, basically we've got every letter positioned in every position. So, you know, you got an AAA or a BBB, CCC, and you just, it won't show you exactly how they interface with each other, but it'll get you in the ballpark of what you've got to do to make them fit together. Final general instructions with some ideas about layout and balance, and here's some things about doing inside ring engravers, bending them from the different offsets, working inside bowls. Some ideas about doing your layout here. Just general things regarding how to hold the work. That's always an important thing, but it's covered better in some of the other books, in my opinion. And then you get the question and answer session. What cleaning agents are generally used in connection with jewelry? Soap, ammonia, cyanide, and water solution and soda. Which one would you use to remove tarnish? Cyanide. Which one would you use to brighten the appearance of the article? Soda. Which one would you use to remove dirt or greasy film? Ammonia. It's almost like a catechism. Anyway, you cannot get a bright cut. Why? Graver's not polished enough. Your graver won't hold a point. Why? Too soft. It should be rehardened and tempered. Well, if you're using good quality high-speed steel or cobalt or carbide, you won't have an issue with that. Anyway, that's that book. I recommend you get it. It's well worth the price. The next book is Engraving on Precious Metals. This book is written by an American engraver and a British engraver. And let's read a little bit of the foreword here, published in 1958. Engraving is one of the few arts at which the English have really excelled. It is also one in which the best modern work can bear comparison with the best of any age. But all skilled engraving is not, alas, beautiful. If engravers want to earn the name artist, as well as craftsmen, Technical efficiency alone is not enough. Craftsmen must continuously experiment with new ideas, enterprising, vigorous, and unashamed, and they must have a sense of artistic good manners. Very few people have genuine creative ability, but most people, certainly those who learn to practice skilled crafts, can and should develop an instinct for style and proportion and scale. Without this artistic discernment, good works of craft become bad works of art. To create is noble, to imitate is dull. A bold experiment which is criticized is better than a timid copy which goes unnoticed. So, in reading this useful and instructive book, it must be remembered that technique is hideous without art. Many ancient crafts are in danger of dying, but engraving is so decorative and useful in so many fields of production that its future seems secure. The machine is indeed used with good results for some types of work, but the handmade letter remains supreme in its own field. The demand for high-quality hand engraving is encouragingly big because no machine-made substitute has yet evolved to replace it. Well, that was 1958. We're getting a lot closer in 2018. It says the authors are representatives of two well-known metal engraving workshops, one in England, one in America, and an English specialist in lettering cut in other materials. Among them, their knowledge covers a very wide field, some of which has never before been dealt with in print. They speak with experience and authority, and their instruction will surely be useful to amateur and professional alike. There is a mistaken tendency to scoff at imperfect amateur attempts at craft work, but the amateurs themselves would be the first to admit their failings. In fact, it is only by attempting oneself to do a difficult piece of engraving that one realizes that what the professionals achieve is almost impossible. Let us then praise the amateurs for trying and the professionals for succeeding. The maintenance of traditional high standards of workmanship, which are now being challenged in so many ways, has never been more important than it is today. This book will help gain public recognition for a craft that is much used, but strangely little known. Okay, that's the foreword, written by Graham Hughes, the art secretary of the Worshipful Company of Goldsmiths. Okay, our contents. We have the engraver's tools and equipment, first cuts, exercises in engraving, engraving the script alphabet, engraving looped script and monograms, block, Roman, and Old English letters, choice of lettering and layout styles, studies in lettering and layout design, more advanced and awkward jobs, polishing, erasing, and restoring surfaces, piercing metals, engraving ivory, and inlaying, ornamental engraving, some workshop hints, and the last chapter is machine engraving and filling engraving. Well, I guess that's not the last. Chapter 15 is some examples of lettering. Okay, we even talk about engravers of the past, the Egyptian hieroglyphs, and the Greek work. The bench. The bench is essential. It must be strong and well made, and sufficiently high to stand at when very large articles has to be engraved, such as a large bowl or tray. And there we have the engraver's bench laid out. I've got my own thoughts about the engraver's bench, and I will be doing a workshop on ergonomics, so watch for that in a future video. But we've got some different types of gravers, attachment methods of the graver into the wood, different shapes and types of gravers, with some of the names maybe a little unfamiliar to us American engravers. Sharpening oil stone, watchmaker's eyeglass or loop, couple examples of ball vices, different engravers, chasing hammers, talking about the heels and the ability to work down inside bowls. Here we get into sharpening some. Okay. There's a lot. Here's the old engraver's trick of checking the sharpness by trying to cut a little bit of your thumbnail out. And here's some things about bend engravers. Again, if we're using modern steels, we don't really have that option. But if we're going to work in certain areas, we do need to know how to do that. First cuts, cutting evenly, doing a flare cut or a straight cut. Learning how to roll the graver, the wrist is the secret. This is all part of what you have to do to excel at doing lettering. Here's a little bit on transferring designs. The old grease and powder method. Sam Alfano sells the transfer wax, which is basically what this technique is. We've got some more exercises here, carving out shields, practicing to do heraldry. Of course, the different colors are represented by the lines engraved in different directions or back and forth, crisscrosses. More information on heraldry than you'll probably need to know in your lifetime. But if you do, you certainly want to get books devoted strictly to heraldry. Monogram panels, again, different shapes that you may want to put something in. Taking prints, talks a little bit here about using damp paper to fill in, pick up ink off of the work, or even just to use the paper itself to make an impression of the work and make a copy that you can save for yourself. More exercises on heraldry. Here we're getting more into the script letter layout, and here we also see the alphabet cut with the arrows showing which directions are up and which directions are down. Again, you can basically see these all are basically straight lines, and the illusion of the curve is from the flare cut or the rolling of the wrist. It gets into a lot of specifics on specific letters, how to cut those, which you need to know, really. You can get by without knowing some of the intricate details of each specific letter, but if you want to master this art, there's some specific parts of the letters that have to be done certain ways. And here we're going to talk about capital letters too. And then we get into the loop scripts, which is a little bit fancier. And it's even got some nice examples of some various artistic things. A little bit of basic scroll for the jeweler. And avoiding rubbing out, talking about which way you should cut on your sketching so that you don't wipe out your nice beautiful layout. Block letters, Roman letters, using the liners for your zigzag or wiggle tool work, Old English, along with how the cuts go in and out with a flat graver. I should not flip these pages maybe quite so fast. And here we get into some things that which style letter works best, particularly the timing, and some of the things about the type of material you're working on. Some letters may be more appropriate than others. Again, layout, positioning where they go. Lots of thoughts on lettering. If you're going to be doing full-time lettering work, this is all very valuable information. If you only do it occasional, you could probably skip these portions. More advanced and awkward jobs. Here's a clamp to hold watch faces or spoon handles or various things. These days we can use things like Thermalock or Jet Set. But some of us still do things similar or create our own molds out of epoxy putty. Engraving on concave surfaces. There's lots of good information here. Methods about polishing and a good polishing wheel. And the dangers of polishing. There's really good information in this book. Precious metal inlays and engraving ivory. That's something that I definitely don't see very often. Don't see at all. Pretty much. Fixing a monogram on leather. That's a quite interesting thing. Probably won't have a lot of call for it, but you never know. Here's this section on engraving in ivory and working with the grain of the ivory. Not to stain it when you're doing your layouts. That's a hard lesson to learn. Engraving in bone, wood, plastics. Of course, plastics have really changed over the years, but it gives you a good jumping off point. Sharpening tools for ivory. I don't know why that wasn't in the other section. And we get a little bit into ornamental engraving. Doesn't really go into scroll very much, but it's partially there. Workshop hints. What to do in case of slipping. Everybody needs to know that. Metals for practice work, transferring designs, copying designs, lubricants for easier and bright cuttings, acid engraving, lots of things. And then we get into the pantograph, how to use it, even how to sharpen their little engravers that are used in there, or cutters. I don't know if I'd call it a graver. Laying out the engravers on the trays. Anyway, that's this book. I would highly recommend this book. And that is Engraving on Precious Metals. Next, we come to The Art of Engraving, reprinted by Lindsay Publications, and that's not Steve. I want to read this little warning. Remember that the materials and methods described here are from another era. Workers were less safety conscious then, and some methods may be downright dangerous. Be careful. Use good solid judgment in your work and think ahead. Lindsay Publications has not tested these methods and materials and does not endorse them. Our job is merely to pass along to you information from another era. Safety is your responsibility. And I would say the same thing for me. Scott Pilkington does not necessarily endorse these methods. I'm just showing you what's here in this book. Table of contents here. Chapter 2 is an introduction. Chapter 2 is actually mechanical drawing. Chapter 1 was the introduction. Chapter 3 is tools, materials for the beginner, first exercises in engraving, block letters, methods of cutting block letters, script letters, cutting small or lowercase script letters, the formation of script capitals, loop script, the practical use of script letters, engraving coffin plates in script, there's a big demand for that, engraving on thimbles and inside of rings. Well, I suspect you'll engrave inside of rings more than on thimbles in these days, but I could be wrong. Engraving inscriptions in script, Old English, methods of cutting Old English, some uses and styles of Old English, Roman letters, odd letters, yeah, there's a lot of those, engraving in spoons and on bangles, you can get in trouble with both of those, shaded Old English, engraving script inscriptions, inscriptions in different styles of letters, engravings on spoon handles, letters on spoon handles and lockets, designing and engraving ciphers, which are monograms, entwined and ornamental ciphers, parallel line ciphers, flower leaf ciphers, and block ciphers. And oh, did I mention this book was published in 1903? So it's been around a while, and some of the terms are a little antiquated. Mechanical drawing, using your protractor and your triangles, things that can help you do layouts. Most of y'all today are probably using computers, so a lot of that's kind of over the top. Here we're going to talk about how to make a transfer grease. Sam Alfano makes his transfer wax, so there's the way to go to that. Of course, there's many other ways to do layouts and transfers today. Tools, gravers, bags, first cuts, block letters, bringing the flat gravers in to create block letters, wiggle tools again, round gravers, here we get into script gravers, and one of the curious things about this book is the alphabets. At no point do these alphabets show which directions to cut the letters. So there's a little bit different technique here. I'll leave it to you to read it and determine which one you think is best for you. Here's your loop scripts. Just have a few more flourishes than the plain scripts. And trying to fit them into things like spoon handles or lockets or hearts. Adding a little extra flourishes here and there. How to set up and hold pieces for coffin plates. My 35 years, I've never been asked to engrave a coffin plate. I've engraved a few urns along the way and could tell some interesting story about those, some of which have been full. You do what you have to do to earn a living sometimes. Old English letters. Bringing a square graver in and doing the flare cut with those. Using a wiggle tool to create Old English letters. Just a lot more of the same that were in the others. Here's some Japanese letters under the odd letter category. Here's some fancier letters, back cut letters, musical notes, some thoughts on how to do some of these things, even Arabic and Hebrew letters. This is worthwhile information that's not covered in the other books. Script descriptions, back to the spoon handles, engraving ciphers or monograms. Let's see, well, there's a No, that's a 3-letter monogram. Breaks them down into the different parts as you're doing that. So that's that one. And next and last, we're going to go to this winner's book. And let's see if that's all going to fit in there. This is a wider book. Let's go this way just a smidge. This book is really my favorite out of the 4, partly because it lays out flat. It's easier to lay out on the workbench. Maybe I just like the look of it. I definitely like the illustrations better. Here's your script. And it's got suggestions here on days and weeks and what you should be doing each day of those weeks to excel at this. Here's your script laying alphabet, which is reversed, which I also like. And here again, it's got all the arrows for the cuts to teach you how to properly cut those. And a lot of useful tips on gaining speeds and how to do the cuts and which way the cuts should be going over. And then here's some more illustrations, photograph illustrations. Here's your block and Old English letters with a variety of different wiggle tools. Fancy names, fine wiggling, coarse wiggling, done from the high angle or the low angle. Working inside spoons. And I'm going to do a video on spoon engraving soon because that's really one of my favorite engraving art styles is spoon work. A lot of different techniques for that. And a lot of time spent on designing script monograms and putting them all together. Ribbon monograms, diamond monograms, round monograms with a fancy block letter. Here's a rustic engraving style. Some people say that my voice is rustic. Japanese engraving letters. How to make impressions, make copies. Here we get into sharpening a little bit here. And liners. More helpful information on specific things. Slipping and fixing of slips when engraving. How to hold various kinds of rings. Engraving articles of silver. Just some useful information for some of these things you're going to be working on. And here we talk about more of their layout methods. And here we've got, again, all of the ribbon letters laid out in monograms with each of the letters laid out in their specific area so that you can kind of mix them together. And a good glossary. And a few more little pictures and odds and ends and what you need to have to get started. And there at the end Nice line cut drawings of our tools of our craft. Which of these 4 books do I think is the best? I'm going to tell you, I'd get them all. None of them are really expensive. You could probably get all of them, all 4 of them, in the $60 to $70 range. And you might get them all, if you're lucky, in the $40 range. So, $10 a piece for this kind of information, it's well worth having on your bench. If you get something strange or odd, you got a reference to go to and look for it. Well, that's all I've got to say about these 4 books. Happy cutting. Hope you've learned something, and hope to see you at the Engraving in Monteagle, Tennessee sometime.